Okay, so today we're going to dive deep into the art and the mind of Bob Camblin.
Oh, yeah?
And you've given us quite a lot to work with here.
Yeah.
So we have his quotes,
Mhm.
um, some thoughts from this book called Zen and the Art of Enlightenment.
Right?
We've got a YouTube video that dissects his watercolor, more or less,
Mhm.
and then some historical stuff too. Like biographies, exhibition history, and things like that.
Right.
So our mission is to kind of synthesize all this down to the core of what made his art and vision so unique.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, Bob Campbell is one of those artists who's kind of a legend, but he's also a huge mystery.
Definitely a big presence, but also shrouded in mystery.
So he was controversial, kind of an iconoclast, I guess.
Yeah, he went against the grain a lot.
But he got a lot of respect for that.
A lot of admiration for that. Yeah.
His art is really sought after, and he worked across all kinds of mediums.
Mhm.
And yet, it feels like we don't really know him.
Yeah, there's so much of his output and his inner world that feels hidden.
Exactly. So that's where we come in.
Right.
So this deep dive is going to offer, hopefully, a more complete picture of this artist who did not fit in a box at all.
Definitely not easy to categorize.
So we're going to look at not just what he created, but also his thought processes, the things that made him who he was, and how his art and his philosophy still speak to us today
Yeah.
in a world that's, all about whatever's hot right now.
Yeah, the fleeting versus the timeless.
Exactly. So let's start with some of his own words.
Yeah, great place to start.
You sent over a ton of his quotes,
Uh-huh.
and we're seeing some really interesting themes in there.
Yeah, definitely.
So, like, one of the first things that jumps out is this idea of how temporary everything is, this sense of impermanence.
Right, that sense of fleetingness comes through in a lot of his work.
And often he's kind of funny about it, too.
Oh, for sure.
So he says, fortunately, some things remain forever. Or another 10 years, perhaps?
Yeah. So Camblin, he acknowledges the ephemeral nature of things, even those we think will last forever.
Yeah, and it really makes you stop and think about how we perceive time and how we assign permanence to things.
It does. It makes you question your own sense of what lasts.
Right, and this whole idea of change, seems to have influenced how open he was to seemingly opposite concepts,
Like what?
like science and magic.
Oh, yeah.
So he has this great quote, look into the atom, you get what you need, look into magic, and you get what you need. Philosophy and art are in both.
He didn't see them as mutually exclusive at all.
No, instead he saw them as different ways of looking for truth.
Exactly. Different lenses to see the world through.
Right, and this kind of leads into his idea of the perfectly average view of the universe.
Right. He talks about sticking with common sense and aiming for that average perspective so you can appreciate those miracles on either side.
On either side of science and magic.
Yeah.
And it's not just about finding some kind of middle ground. It's more like he saw wonder in the everyday and the ordinary.
Yeah, blurring the lines between the mundane and the extraordinary.
And that's where intuition comes into,
Oh, absolutely. That sixth sense, as he called it.
which he defines as being, without a doubt, senza dubio.
Trusting that gut feeling.
Right, going beyond just the rationale.
And then there's that real emphasis on being true to yourself.
Yeah, like surrendering to nature.
I cannot tell a lie to myself for very long, he wrote back in 74.
Right, and then he says, find something in nature that completes you, and then surrender.
Like seeking that deep connection with something bigger.
And it's interesting how this whole search for truth, influence his thinking about art itself.
Oh, how so?
Well, he moves away from that idea of art for art's sake.
Which is, kind of a classic art world concept.
Right, and he moves towards something way more personal.
Well, grounded in his own experience.
Yeah, he calls it art for life's sake, or art for my sake, or art for survival's sake.
So it became essential to him.
Yeah, like it was a tool for living.
And navigating the world.
And then he gets into this really fascinating area of how thought and action work together.
Right, how they relate it.
He says, when you think, don't act. When you act, don't think.
Whoa.
And then he talks about the need to step off the train of thought to find real power.
That's deep.
And really aligns with a lot of Zen principles.
Oh, definitely. That whole idea of quieting the mind.
To tap into something more intuitive.
Yeah, bypassing the analytical.
And his poetry really brings this to life.
Oh, for sure.
So like this one, the cosmos waves at me with tree leaves, sun-heated air moves across the electrons of my skin. Sunlight reflects those greens, first white, then yellow-green, and in deep shadows blue.
Wow, so vivid, so sensory, you can almost feel it.
And then there's this one. Not a leaf moves, and yet we all feel the cool breeze.
Oh, it's so good. It's like that unseen connection that we all feel, even when there's no obvious sign.
And then he has this really interesting take on communication and learning.
Yeah, what's that?
He says, if you argue or if you agree, you may learn, but you do not communicate.
So true communication is about more than just exchanging ideas or agreeing.
Right. It's deeper than that.
It's about being open to different perspectives.
And his thoughts on learning are kind of radical, too.
How so?
He says we should learn to fail, learn to relax, learn to feel, learn how to really think.
That's powerful stuff.
And then he sums it up with, I didn't learn anything new, but I know a lot more now.
That's such a paradox. I love it.
It's like he's saying that real learning is about more than just accumulating facts.
Yeah, it's about experiencing and feeling and integrating those things.
So we've been talking about Camblin's philosophy, but now let's look at one specific piece of art.
Okay, which one?
His watercolor, more or less.
Right, the one that's in Zen and the Art of Enlightenment.
Yeah, and there's also this great YouTube video that really analyzes it.
Oh, cool. I'd like to see that.
So in this painting, you've got these really dense, almost like geological masses on either side.
Like rock formations or something.
Yeah, and they're done in these earthy tones.
Okay, so very natural feeling.
And then right in the middle is this rectangular area with these pale openings.
Like a window or a doorway.
Right. And it's these whites and soft yellows, and it just draws your eye right to it.
Like a light at the end of a tunnel.
And above this area, you've got these light, wispy blue strokes.
Adding to that sense of airiness.
And then there were these details that just add so much meaning.
What kind of details?
So like in the mass on the right, there are these faint shapes that look like skulls.
Oh, wow. So subtly bringing in that idea of mortality.
At the very bottom of the painting, there's this thick, black horizontal border.
Creating a boundary.
Yeah, like we're looking into another world.
So this more or less piece is full of ambiguity.
Oh yeah, it's really open to interpretation.
The YouTube video calls it a haunting landscape of duality.
Right, with that contrast between the geometric opening and those chaotic organic shapes around it.
It could also be seen as this eroded landscape leading to an unknown horizon.
Yeah, with that light in the center representing both hope and mystery.
And like you said, those skulls are subtle, but definitely there.
Yeah, reminding us that life and death are always intertwined.
And then there's the title, More or Less.
It's so simple, but so profound.
It really makes you question what you're seeing.
Like, is that central opening offering us more than we realize? Or is it actually less than we want?
Or is it both?
Right? Is it an invitation or is it a void?
It really challenges our assumptions.
And there are all these connections to Eastern philosophy, too.
The YouTube video goes into how it reflects Zen ideas about impermanence.
The idea that decay and structure aren't opposites, but two parts of the same thing.
Right, that constant cycle of change.
And that central opening could be seen as a path beyond our dualistic thinking.
Well, the wild growth in the skull represent that ongoing flux of existence.
And then there's this idea that the title itself is like a kokan.
A coat.
You know, one of those Zen riddles that's meant to make you think differently?
Oh, right.
So it's like the painting's asking more or less of what?
More or less of reality.
Exactly how much do we really understand?
And the YouTube video brings in the I Ching, too.
The I Ching.
Specifically, hexagram 23, splitting apart.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one.
Well, it's about erosion transformation and the need to surrender to the natural order of things.
Oh, I see the connection.
And then there's that link to Lao Tzu's concept of the virtue of emptiness.
So that central open space, which might seem empty, is actually what makes movement and possibility possible.
Exactly, the power of what isn't there.
And from like an existential viewpoint,
Mm-hmm.
this painting is all about uncertainty.
We're drawn to that light.
But there's no clear path.
No easy answer.
It's like life itself.
Full of ambiguity.
And it's been called an exercise in restraint, too.
In restraint.
It gives us enough information to be engaged, but not so much that it tells us exactly what to think.
It leaves space for our own imagination.
And that skull is so subtle.
It's like a whisper.
It makes it more about our own internal landscape, you know.
Facing our own mortality.
And the YouTube video talks about how there's this constant interplay of opposites in the painting. Prince and accents life and decay, movement, and stillness.
It invites us to be patient.
And to accept that we don't always have all the answers.
And that bright opening in the middle has been called a symbol of hope.
A luminous exit.
Leading away from the chaos around it.
And then there are these echoes of art history, too.
Like what?
Well, the way he uses natural elements and themes of mortality connects to the Romantic era.
Oh, yeah, like those Memento Mori and Vanitas paintings.
Exactly, those reminders of life's fleeting nature.
And that central opening is like a doorway,
Yeah, like in Caspar David Friedrich's paintings.
symbolizing a journey or a transition.
And even the way Camblin applied the paint is meaningful.
How so?
Well, the thick texture of those earthy tones is similar to Anselm Kiefer's work.
Conveying a sense of history and memory,
And the contrast between the bright light and the dark shadows is like chiaroscuro,
like Caravaggio.
but with a modern twist.
And that black border at the bottom has been compared to the edges in abstract expressionist paintings.
Expressing raw emotion
So this more or less painting is really about being on a threshold.
between the complexity of life and the possibility of something new.
And that tension between more and less is at the heart of it all.
We have to decide what to hold on to and what to let go of.
It's a powerful piece.
Okay, so we've talked about his philosophy in one of his paintings.
Right.
Now let's look at Camblin's life.
His biography.
Yeah, so he was born in Oklahoma in 1928,
Okay.
and he went to the Kansas City Art Institute,
Which must have been a formative experience.
and then he got a Fulbright scholarship to go to Italy.
Wow, that's huge.
And that was a really transformative time for him.
I bet.
When he came back to the U.S., he taught art at a bunch of different places.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1976, he made this big decision to quit teaching and just focus on his art.
That's dedication.
Yeah, and he embraced a more nomadic lifestyle.
So his early life must have had a big impact on him.
Oh, definitely. His parents were both artists,
Interesting.
and he grew up in Ponca City during the Marland era.
With the Marlin Estate and the Pioneer Woman statue.
Yeah, and those things definitely influenced his understanding of culture,
And even in the movie The Wizard of Oz is mentioned as an influence.
shaping his imagination.
And his relationships were important too,
Like his friendship with Forrest Harrisberger,
which started in high school.
and lasted his whole life.
That's beautiful.
And later he collaborated with other artists like Earl Staley and Joe Tate,
Forming the group, holding firm.
and they really challenged the art world norms.
So that Fulbright in Italy was really key,
Oh yeah, he saw all those masterpieces in the Uffizi Gallery.
which must have expanded his view of art history.
But it was the Capuchin catacombs that really stuck with him.
With all those preserved bodies.
Yeah, had a deep impact on him.
Leading to those recurring mummy images in his work.
And he even reinterpreted Botticelli's Birth of Venus in Primavera,
Adding his own contemporary touches.
like references to KPFT radio and hidden imagery.
Showing how Italy stayed with him.
And his artistic style evolved over time, too.
How so?
Well, he started with abstract expressionism. But then in the 1970s, he pioneered this style called Muchas Volantes.
What's that?
It's like optical illusions made with dots and dashes.
Oh,
He did it with Nancy Giordano.
interesting.
And it drew inspiration from Dada and surrealism.
Wow, so playful and dreamlike.
And he often signed his works anonymous,
Anonymous.
which shows how he felt about ego and the idea of individual creation.
He didn't need the recognition.
And he was really critical of the art world, too.
He saw galleries and museums as sometimes perpetuating the same mistakes artists make.
Yeah, and he wanted exhibitions to be more immersive,
Like an environment created by the artist.
so viewers could really experience the art without distractions.
That makes sense.
And he believed in hard work and faith as stabilizing forces in the art world.
So amidst all the chaos, he found his anchors.
And he had these recurring motifs that pop up in his art.
Like a personal language.
So there are scarecrows,
Which were inspired by Gunter Grass's dog ears.
and they represent renewal and metamorphosis.
And gloves and machines.
And his Saint Bambola series, which is very personal.
Each one loaded with meaning.
And he used text in his art, too.
Not just as labels.
No, it was more like a disguise or a clue.
Challenging how we interpret art.
And it connects to Tom Wolfe's critique of the art world in The Painted Word.
Where words dominate the meaning.
Right. And Camblin wanted us to trust our own eyes.
To believe seeing.
And he loved to hide meanings in his work.
Adding layers of complexity.
And sometimes those secrets wouldn't be revealed for years.
Ah.
He wanted to make us question reality.
Going even deeper than the surrealists.
And he said he wanted to remake Goya in 20th century terms.
That's ambitious.
Early on, he dealt with social protest in his art.
And later he combined that with abstract elements.
He was influenced by Cremoni and those ancient Etruscan figures.
Adding to his visual language.
And in the 1970s, he focused on metamorphosis and the cycle of life and death.
Referencing Freud and artists like De Chirico, Grunewald, Kazantzakis, and Grass.
Exploring those fundamental human experiences.
And in the 80s, he started combining drawing and watercolor, creating these illusionistic surfaces that hint at hidden stories.
And his draftsmanship was always incredible.
So he's being rediscovered now.
Yeah, he's been called a mystical trickster figure.
And his art has been called a portal into truly experiencing art.
He taught other artists too.
Like Earl Staley, who said Camblin taught him everything he knows about drawing and composition.
And Penny Serling said he questions everything and everybody.
But he also valued collaboration,
And Carolyn Farb said that all his work was primarily autobiographical.
reflecting his own life story.
He influenced so many artists.
He had a huge impact,
And in his later years, he moved around a lot.
living in Oregon and Louisiana.
And he kind of lost touch with his friends in Houston.
He became even more elusive,
And it's been hard to organize posthumous exhibitions.
adding to that sense of mystery.
So Bob Camblin brought together all these different influences.
Then the I Ching surrealism, his own personal mythology.
He created art that makes you think and challenges your perceptions.
And for you, our listener,
Camblin's work encourages you to engage with art on a deeper level.
to look beyond the surface.
Embrace ambiguity. Trust your intuition. Find your own meaning.
His emphasis on thinking critically is so relevant today,
So our final thought for you,
is to step off the train of thought.
think about what habits might be holding you back.
What would happen if you allowed yourself some quiet observation?
Like when you're looking at one of Camblin's paintings.
Food for thought.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.